This is the first of the video lab project discussions for the third volume of the Connected Components Workbench series, the one that pertains to the Panelview800 and the PowerFlex 525. You see here that we are on roughly page 76. I say roughly because who knows about these page numbers. As I change things, add things, the numbers can shift. But for right now, you see over here on the left that it's page 76. What's important, this is part one of the CCW Micro800 set of manual. Down at the bottom here, you see a blue box, HMI VFD users. If you are using the companion manual for PV800, PF 525, go aside to that manual and complete the first project, P1, then return here and continue. You'll see this all the way through both Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the Connected Components Workbench with Micro800 training manuals, the lab project manuals. If you don't have a panel view, you can still use that third manual. You just don't have a panel view to download it to, but you can still go through the process of creating screens and you can read how to do it. So you're still money ahead by learning what's in that third manual. So let's go ahead and replace this with the lab project in the Panelview Plus, or the Panelview800 manual. Now, I didn't start on project P1. I paused on this page to make sure you understand that the Micro800 has a whole bunch, quite a list of data types. Now, I'm not going to go into depth talking about data types, but the primary data types would be like a single bit, that's a Boolean, 8 bits is a single integer, 16 bits is a integer, 32 bits is a double integer, and of course there are real or floating point. Those are the kind of the atomic data types that make up all molecules of data. But notice that in the Panelview800, you don't have as many data types to work with as you do in the Micro800. So if you're going to try to access information in the Micro800 memory from the panel view, I would be thinking up front what data types you're going to use in the Micro800 to facilitate smoother integration of the screen objects that have to access the data in the Micro800. Okay, so let's continue on to the first project. And the first thing that you did in P1 is you had to add a panel view to the project. Now, this is not adding a panel view to the project. This is setting up a panel view piece of hardware. What you're looking at, and the reason you kind of grainy images is because these are camera captures of the screens on a PV800, Panelview800. So when you get your piece of hardware and you power it up, you're going to end up, as soon as it boots up, fresh out of the box, you're going to see that first configuration screen where it says number 1 select, terminal settings. So what you're doing here is you're going to set up the Ethernet interface on that Panelview800. Now there may be other interfaces that you can use. We're only interested in the Ethernet for this particular manual. So you see the Ethernet setup here continue to step number 10. When you get to step number 11, this is not germane until you actually have downloaded a project into the Panelview800. And even then, you may not see these screens. But let's say your panel view has multiple program files on it. This is how you would go to find the one that you want and load it. So you see 11, select File Manager, and then 12, select Main, etc. So 11 through 15, you won't be doing this. The project that we were doing in the Volume 1 of the CCW with the Micro800 manual is up on the screen as well. Now, I happen to be using a Micro820. You might be using a Micro810, 830, 850, 870, or you may be using Micro850 that's the simulator. For this particular project with the Panelview800, I would recommend that you use a real piece of hardware to eliminate certain difficulties that you might run into. But the first thing we had to do was to add a panel view to the project. So you have to be offline, see, disconnected. You go to devices to add a device, click on it, and up will pop a list of devices that you can add. And you could add any of these. However, we want a Panelview800 terminal, and I have a 7-inch. So you see there's a 4, 7, and 10-inch. Select, add to project, and there it is. Now, it doesn't look like there's anything there, but there actually is. Double click on it, and the first thing it's going to do is to ask you whether you want landscape or portrait. I always use landscape, but you could do portrait if you want to mount the panel view on its side and have a taller screen instead of wider. Once you select that landscape or portrait, now you have a full project. And there's only one thing I really want to look at right off the bat, and that's here on screen number 1. I double clicked on it, and you see there's a go to configuration button on screen number 1. And right now this is really designated as your startup screen, which means that when you power it up, if you have a program loaded and it's running, this screen comes up. Well, of course, there's nothing on it but that go to config button. You want to make sure that you have a go to config button somewhere on a screen that you can easily get to if you want to take the Panelview800 out of the run mode and put it back into the configuration mode, which you can see the screens over here on the left. So you see at the very last screen down here is the screen we're looking at with a go to config button. Well, right now that's all I wanted to show you in relationship to the screens. What we need to do is set up the communication between the microcontroller and the Panelview800. And to do that, and there are more than one serial interface, but we're only concerned about Ethernet. So I'm going to go down and select Allen Bradley Control and Information Protocol. They used to call it something else, can't remember now what, SIP. Common Industrial Protocol, Control Information Protocol. They got a bunch of names. Anyway, select Allen Bradley SIP, and then we come down here and we want to put in an Ethernet address. Well, if we go back to RS Links and we look to see the address of our controller, you can see it's 100, 100, 100, 117. Now, for those of you that don't know a whole lot about Ethernet, that IP address, 100, 100, 100, 117, belongs to somebody out there. Somebody out there owns it. However, because we are in our own private network, we can use any IP addresses that we want. We just can't connect it to the internet, and we're not going to. We've got our own little work cell. I like 100, 100, 100 because it's easy to remember. 117 is the network address for that LC20. These other three, 100, 100, 100, that's the network address because our subnet mask is 255, 255, 255. That means the first 3 octets here are the address of the network, not any nodes on the network. So I just want to go look to see what my controller was. You see it's browsing, and there's no red X on it, so it is 117. So we're going to go in here, and we're going to put in 100, 100, 100, 117. And we're going to verify or validate. So we've got, and I'm going to hit enter and then hit validate. Now, over here, you see this popped up, validation results. And that down here says PV800 app 1 is valid. Please save your application. So I can close that. I'm going to save my application up here. It's interesting that they still have the small floppy disk symbol for the save button. I don't know anybody that saves to floppy disk anymore, but the symbol stuck. That's for those of you that came along after floppy disk. That's what that symbol is, floppy disk. Okay, so now my project, my Panelview800, is going to be looking for PLC number 1 controller type Micro800 at 100, 100, 100, 117. So I have my communication set up. Now back over in your panel view here, I had you set up an IP address. In this case, we're doing the IP address up here, 100, 100, 111. It could be 111, it could be 2, it could be 253. That fourth octet is the actual node location on the network. I just happen to use 11. Remember, 100, 100, 100 is the network address, not the panel view address. It is 11 on the network, 100, 100, 100. And the subnet mask, 255, 255, 255, 0, that means the first three octets, 100, 100, 100, is the network address. I say octet because each of those 3-digit values, if you want to call them that, represents 8 bits, 0 through 255. That's why we call them octets. Now that we have communications set up, we want to download just to verify for your own edification that you are communicating with the Panelview800 and you can download to it. So we go to PV800 App 1, right-click, download. Preparing device for download, application downloaded successfully, start the new application. You can say yes or no. It really doesn't matter at this point. I would be more inclined to say yes, just so you can see the screen 1 with the go to config button on it. That's how simple it was. So we downloaded, and now what you would see on your screen is this screen right here with the go to config. Let's add a new screen. We go to screens, right click, add screen, and it creates screen number 3. Now yours probably says screen number 2. That's because I already created a screen number 2 when you weren't looking, and I deleted it, and it just goes to the next one in sequence. But we're going to change this anyway. Rename. We're going to call it IO. So screen number 2 now is IO. Then we want to go to the main screen, and we want to create a screen object. So we go to Toolbox. We go to Entry, go to Screen button, add one over here, and we're going to throw it in right on top of our go to config. Double click, and we'll call it IO. And then we'll go to Properties. Then we'll go to Properties, and we're going to change the font to 36. So now we've got a go-to screen, and we put text on it, okay, IO, but the properties, we have to go to navigation down here and put in IO. Now, if you're going to add navigation to a button, the screen already has to be created. So notice we created the screen called IO before we created the button and assigned it to IO. So now, when you click on this button on the main screen, it's going to take you to screen number 2. On the main screen, you can go to the IO screen, or you can go to Config. On the IO screen, unless we add something, we can't leave that screen. So we're going to add a go to previous or go back button. So we go over to Toolbox, and we go to Navigation, and we pick back one screen. And we're going to put this over here. I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to type it all the way out. Previous. Bump up the text size. I don't think it'll take 36, but we'll just do that just for grins. Whenever you see an asterisk like that, that means that the text was too big to fit in the space that you gave it. So let's go back to Properties, and we'll knock it down to 24. and it just fits. We can also make it bold, font bold. See, it says false. Switch it to true. And now if we go to this screen, we can click on this button to go back to the previous screen. Now if you wanted to go to the main screen, you would add another button, which would be go to screen, and we might put it here. I put main screen, but it could just as easily just say main. So we'll go to properties and we'll bump the font up to 24. And we'll make it bold while we're at it. And it fits. We didn't do the navigation though, so let's go back here to properties for this button. Go down to navigation and pick main. Okay, now if we're on the I/O screen, we can go back to the previous, which in this case would have been the main, or we can go to the main screen. The reason this is go back one screen, and it's not the same because let's say you had a dozen screens and you got to the I/O screen from some other screen than the main screen, but you want to allow the operator to go directly from this screen back to the main screen. This is what you would do. So let's download this. We'll save it first. Right click on the app, download. Validation results, says it's valid, there are no warnings. Stop the loaded application. Now you may have seen that before. What that means is it has an application loaded and it's running. We want to stop that, yes. Now it's going to finish the download. A file with that name exists, overwrite, yes. Start the new application. Now you won't be able to see the screen, but if you follow this project and you did exactly what I just did, now adding that main screen button I don't think was in your project, but at this point you could go to the main screen, click on I/O, it'll go to the I/O screen, then you click on previous and it comes back. Just for grins, let's download this and check out our screen navigation. So we go to the Panelview800 app, right click, download, stop the loaded application. That means it's already running an application. Do we want to stop it? Yes, we do. A file with that name exists. Overwrite? Yep. Downloaded successfully. Start the new application. Yes. Now, if you don't have a piece of hardware, you know, a Panelview800, then you can't look to see, you can't download if you don't have something to download to. So you're going to have to take my word for it when I test the application. Now, in my case, because I have two ways to get back to the main screen. That was if I push on I/O, it'll go to this screen, and then I can use previous to go back, or I can go to the main screen. Now, this was outside of what you did in the lab, but you can go ahead and do it if you like. Typically, I put a go to main screen button in the exact same spot and on every screen except for the main screen. That way, the operator always knows exactly where that button's at. They really don't even have to read. They just know if they touch the lower right-hand corner or wherever you put the button, put the button, that it's going to go back to the main screen. In the manual it says, touch the I/O button. Does it change screens? Yes. Touch previous. Does it return? Yes. Now we're going to add a screen object that reads from the controller's memory. What we have right now is just screen navigation. It goes back and forth between screens, but it really is not interacting with any values in the PLC's memory. So let's do that. And we're going to do that on the I/O screen. Our first screen object is going to be a lookie, something that you look at, and its state represents the state of a bit or a word in memory, a value in memory. So we go to the toolbox and we go to display, and you see multi-state indicator. So we select multi-state indicator and then we drop one on the screen, and I move mine up into the corner. Then I had you double click on it to open up the configuration pop-up, and I had you select this state and delete it. Delete. Delete. Okay, we don't delete the error state, but now we have a two-state multi-state indicator. It's going to display one of two things. And then the text, I had you make it input 0. Input 0. Then I had you change state 1 color to green. We'll leave the error state alone, but typically that would be red. I'll make it red just for grins. You don't have to do that because we're not going to create an error state. It's unlikely you could come up with an error state for a binary device. It's either 0 or 1, so it's going to be blue or green. Then I had to change the font size to 28 for both states. Then for the text color for the one state, or 0 and 1 for the one state, I had you make that black. So it's black against green. White against blue is sufficient. And just for grins, I'm going to go over here and select bold for caption font. So bold for caption font, font size 28. I changed the text to IN00 for both, and I changed this color from blue to green. Okay, now I'm going to go over to the Properties tab, and I'm going to go down to Connections, and there's only one connection for a multi-state indicator, and that is a read tag. So I'll say it's new because I've not created this tag yet. Go to External Address, and I'm going to take digital input 0. Now this is the advantage of having the HMI device added to your Micro800, is that it gives you direct access to the data table in the Micro820. So I'm going to pick that, say OK. Now I have assigned that screen object Boolean type to address digital input 0 PLC 1. Remember, we configured our path. I had you select advanced over here and then change this to a read. Now I'm going to validate. Validate. It goes through and it says valid, please save your application. You don't have to, but I'll save it. Now we're going to download. I left the controller in the program mode, so when I tested my button or my multi-state indicator, it did not change from blue to green. I put the system in the run mode, and then it did. It was in the program mode, which backs up what we showed you earlier about how the I/O behaves between program and run mode. This video is getting too long, so I'm going to stop it here. We'll call this project P1a, and actually in the manual you can see that we just finished P1a, and now we're going to start P1b in the next video. Thank you for watching.